Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited that you've joined us for this episode, which is with an international man of mystery.
Yes, we are very excited to be joined on the show by Mr. Nomad Numbers. Now, we have the privilege of knowing Mr. Nomad Numbers' real name, but you guys don't get that. So he is just Mr. Nomad Numbers for this interview.
Yeah, so he writes for nomadnumbers.com along with his wife, and they are very upfront and very transparent about all their finances through their blog. So they have been traveling, living as nomads, and just really documenting the experience of how they're using money that they had saved and invested during the initial parts of their career to support themselves now, all that type of stuff. So because of all that transparency they're doing on that side, they want to keep their kind of personal profile a little bit more low-key. And so they go by Mr. and Mrs. Nomad Numbers, which is quite fun. And so in this episode, we're diving into lots of stuff around finances, around budgeting, around planning, cost of living. And we're also talking a little bit about Taiwan, where he is based right now. They've been there for the majority of 2020. And so we talk a little bit about what it's been like in Taiwan and what it seems to be like going forward. So we really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to check out more of the Nomad Numbers blog, go to nomadnumbers.com. And as you know from listening to previous episodes, on our The World Wanderers Insider episode, we're really focused on sharing different ways that people are creating a nomad life for themselves, whether it is through saving and investing or whether it's through taking on different jobs like teaching English or proofreading academic papers, whatever it may be. So we've got lots of interviews with people who are creating a career that allows them to travel. And you can go to patreon.com/theworldwanderers to get access to that. And then you get the link for the World Wanderers Insider feed, add it to your podcast app, and get all of those wonderful episodes. So that's patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
All right, now on to the interview with Mr. Nomad Numbers. Mr. Nomad Numbers, welcome to the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to chat with you today. And I know that you and Mrs. Nomad Numbers are a little bit anonymous. Are we allowed to say your real name in this episode?
No, you can just call me Mr. Nomad. I think that's good. We are trying to keep our anonymity on the internet so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you actually tell us a little bit about that? Because I think this is like such an interesting and cool concept in this digital age to have a presence online, yet have, a little bit of anonymity. Is that the word?
Anonymity.
Anonymity.
First and foremost, just like for privacy reason, since we do share a lot of the place when we are going to, especially on our blog and what we do, even though we're far from being famous, it was just making sure that we don't get into trouble of people trying to find us or, trying to see where we are. So that way we have the flexibility of sharing what we feel like sharing and not having to worry about that too much. I think that was the essence of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And where did you guys come up with the idea for Mr. and Mrs. Nomad Numbers?
I think because we both, or maybe myself more than Mrs. does, but we both love numbers. And since the beginning of our journey, we've been really tracking our budget and our cost. And since we are adopting a nomadic lifestyle, we just combine those two concepts together. So it's like, and that's some of the things we do share on the blog. It's just how much we spend to do all of the things we do. So that's how those two entities came together.
Awesome. And so we're really curious before we kind of dive into budgeting and numbers and that part of it. How did you get started traveling?
Yeah, so I think I've got the travel bug early on since I was a kid. I grew up in France, and with my parents, we've always used to go travel maybe 4 weeks a year in the summer, especially in the summer, we are making those big trips. Still within France because I grew up as a very modest family. So I was always excited about exploring, doing something new, seeing new places. And I think later on, as we've met with Mrs. Nomad Numbers, she has a similar experience with travel when she spent a few years abroad. And then she's starting to realize like all of the diversity that comes with travel and the people you meet and the things you see. So I think that's how our love for travel started. And then later on, as we met and we were discussing our plan, our relationship, travel was something that also came up pretty quickly. We actually were discussing, oh, we should take a year of travel. We should take a year to travel. And I was asking, oh, why not taking more than a year? We went into doing a lot of research about the cost of travel, and we met people like you guys, which were being like location independent. And remember having your episode when you were moving to Mexico for a long period of time, and other travel-minded people that were really encouraging us to think about travel as like a long term, like instead of living to travel, it's more like travel as a way of life. That's what got us to become at the end full-time slow travelers.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. That's really inspiring. And did you and Mrs. Nomad Numbers do quite a bit of travel together outside of France before you got the idea of becoming nomadic?
Yeah, so we actually met. So I grew up in France. I moved to California in 2008, and I've met Mrs. Nomad Numbers in 2016. So we met in California. We did some kind of fast travel or regular travel. So basically like your regular 1 or 2 weeks of travel before that, maybe on our first years after we've met. But quickly after that, since we were both excited about travel in general, we really decided to go on that bigger project about like, oh, let's take that year off to travel.
And were you working in a career where it seemed like it would be relatively easy to kind of convert into something that you could do location independently? Or were you doing something where you were like, oh no, I'm going to have to quit my job, take this time off and like just start doing something new while we're traveling?
So we were both working in tech. So for me, it was difficult to leave my job because I had to be at the office and the company I was working with did not give me the option. But for her, the last job she was on before we left was a fully remote job. There was the company did not have office buildings, so everybody was working from everywhere. So as we started on that journey, she was able to keep working, which she did for a little bit. Then ultimately she decided to stop as well because she really to truly embrace the slow living experience, and also because we have the ability not to have to work if we wanted to. Yeah, so we have a bit of that mix, and we were able to see the pro and cons of both options through that transition.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then where did Taiwan come into the whole travel story?
So we were, I guess, I can say that the pandemic brought us to Taiwan. We were in Indonesia in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. So at that point, we were already 2 years into our solo travel. So we just had to decide what do we want to do. So the default option was to go back home. All will be, in that case, California, like many people were doing. But then we also started looking at other options in terms of number of cases. There was at the time in March, there was already a lot of contamination happening on the West Coast in the US. So we look at places that were doing well, and that's how we ended up with Taiwan. I think we were shortlisting Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, which were places that we were already familiar with, as well as Taiwan. And then ultimately we chose Taiwan because they seems to have the lower number of cases at the time. And Mrs. Nomad Numbers also had some family there. So we felt like, okay, we could go there. And then if something's happened, at least there is some family that can help us there. Yeah, so that's how we ended up in Taiwan, which ended up being the best place to be right now, at least for us.
Yeah. What's it been like there since March?
As of today, I think there was only the total number of cases in Taiwan has been really low. I think we have, I was checking the numbers this morning. There was like 584 cases and only 7 deaths. So when we look at the numbers from the US, those numbers look pretty small. And then, so the number reflect the reality. There is no, for us, life has still been moving the same way it was before the pandemic. We still get to go outside to hang out. We go hiking, we go to all of the amazing things that Taiwan offer, which whether it's like snorkeling, scuba diving, we get out to restaurants, we go to crowded public transportation, we go to night markets. So yeah, it's pretty much life as normal here. The only sign that you will guess there with the pandemic is that you will have to wear masks in public transportation and in some grocery stores. But beside that, everything else is pretty much normal for us here.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome that you were able to find a place that has, handled the whole situation well, and life is pretty much back to normal, it sounds like, in most ways.
I think that is also a reflection of how Taiwan has been doing well to handle the pandemic. So being an island, it has, of course, tighter control on its border, but there have been, since we arrived in March, there was already 2 weeks mandatory quarantine that was instituted to, I think the day we arrived was supposed to still not be mandatory, but they changed the rules as we were flying. So as we landed, we went from, we were going to self-quarantine ourselves anyway, to now you have to self-quarantine. So we had an Airbnb for 2 weeks, and then they were asking for our phone numbers because they wanted to make sure they could track our locations. Then they ask us for our address. They ask us not to take public transportation, only private transportation to get to our place, and then to stay in the apartment for a full 14 days. So if you go try to step out of your apartment, there was a police, police officers that were tracking everyone to make sure that everybody were following the rules. So then you will be likely caught within an hour or so. So they were really, really following this, which I guess ended up making the entire, providing them the ability to totally control the virus. So because most of the cases have been imported to Taiwan. So I think having that quarantine in place was helping them controlling that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so to rewind a little bit before 2020, where did you guys start off your nomad journey, and how did you kind of plan out your initial route and where you wanted to go?
Yes. So we started in 2018. Because the first year Mrs. Nomad Numbers was working, we were basically constrained to the America. Because our job was requiring to be available in specific time zones, so basically on the East Coast. So we decided to explore this part of the world, which, as you know, it's many options. Because we wanted to slow travel, we basically started with Canada and Quebec for 3 months in the summer of 2018. And then we went south to Mexico for about 4 months or 100 days. We did explore a few places in Mexico. So we went to places like Mexico City, as you guys been, Puerto Vallarta, Oaxaca, San Miguel de Allende. And then that's led us past the winter. As we get into the spring, we did a short trip back home, California, and then we went to Aruba. So yeah, mostly decided to stay around the America for that first year. And then as Mrs. Nomad Numbers decided to stop working, then that gave us the ability to start exploring the rest of the world. So that's when in year 2, we went to Europe, Asia, and now we're still in Asia.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it seems like you are going to stay in Taiwan for a while. Is that your plan?
Yeah, so we plan to stay here for the foreseeable future. We actually find a way to get a 3 years residency. So now we are Taiwan resident, which hopefully give us enough time for the rest of the world to heal for the virus, and then so then we can resume international travel at that point. But so that's the plan for now.
And what was it like going through the process of getting residency in Taiwan?
So I think we've got pretty lucky because we didn't know we had a way that we could get a residency. So we just stumbled about it as we have a random conversation with friends we met there. So we went through, we apply into a program which is not very well known outside of Taiwan. I think Taiwan could do definitely a better job as promoting everything from the place itself and all of the things available to people here. So yeah, it's called the Taiwan Gold Card program, and it's basically it's a program that they created 2 years ago to attract foreign skilled workers to come to the country. Because usually the process to come to Taiwan, it's a bit similar to the one in the United States, and I'm not familiar with the one of Canada, but you need to apply for a job, so then the company can sponsor you to enter the country, and then you come to the country. This program is doing the things the other way around, like they check your skills, and if they deem you that you are valuable foreigners to come to the country, then they give you a visa, and then you have the ability to find a job with that visa once you arrive to Taiwan. So we dive into this program, and then we realized that it's not as elitist as we thought it was, because I think it's promoted into like they promote it as like the first person to get the gold card was the co-founder of YouTube. And we are thinking, well, we don't have that entrepreneurship kind of etiquette, so that's not going to work for us. They're probably targeting like a very niche set of foreigners. But actually, when you dig into the program, they target people with various type of skill sets. So it can be science and technology. It can be, if you're an artist, it can be education based. It can be economy based. So there is a few qualifications that they are looking for. And then for each of those, there is a set of requirements. But yeah, so that's how we've ended up getting our residency through that program. And now that's giving us, like I said, a work permit if we want to look for a job, but as well as a way to come in and out of the country. We have a multi-entry permit as well. So that gives us the opportunity to hopefully next year try to visit our family outside of Taiwan. And then if the situation is still the same, come back to Taiwan. Along with access to national health care. So that's also helping us as well to reduce some of our costs as we are staying here. And there is a few more benefits as well.
Yeah. It sounds like you were able to get onto like a great residency program, and being able to be residents of Taiwan sounds like an awesome thing to do right about now.
Yeah. So we were already prepared to go back home, because at that point, back in July or August, because we got a 3-month visa that Taiwan, being a really amazing country, has been extending up to 6 months, and actually they are still extending. So everybody that entered the country prior to March can still stay as of now in the country. But we were just we were expecting this to stop, and we're thinking going back to California, because none of the other countries were doing well. We're hoping places like Australia maybe to open their border, but none of that happened. So yeah, we've got very lucky to find about this program, and now that we've been approved, we feel very grateful for Taiwan to welcome us for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. And so for the blog and for Nomad Numbers, was that something that you were thinking of right from the start of your experience, or did that come up kind of after you'd started traveling?
No, we started the blog pretty much at the beginning. So as we were making that transition basically we went from fully working to not working at all, and having the opportunity to basically use our time to focus on our passion, quote unquote, or hobbies. So for me, as the first year, since Mrs. Nomad Numbers was still working for me, is like, what do I do with my time? And because I was already tracking all of those numbers on the back end, I was thinking, it would be interesting to show to people that actually the travel, because as we started looking into that, initially what was 1 year of travel only, we realized that you can travel for not as much as people think. I think Mrs. Nomad was initially throwing numbers like, you need $100,000 to travel for a full year, because she was exposed of people that were doing those long 1 year big travel trip, sabbatical type of thing, when they were trying to hit every country they could and all of that. When for me, coming from France and a much more modest country in terms of cost of living and how much money people were used to spend on vacation, I knew it was way less. So we'll quickly realize actually it's a fraction of that numbers to travel. So that's something we wanted to share with people that were interested on embracing solo travel. And that's what we put a lot of effort as to put that content into the blog. or basically for every place we go, showing to people exactly how much we're spending, down to every expenses. And so then they can realize that, a full year of travel for us was costing us less than $30,000, which was actually almost way less than our rent that we are used to pay in California. And also not too crazy numbers for all of the things we've been doing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think that if for some people, if they're like living in a country that costs a little bit more, like US, Canada, some European countries, and then they're just taking vacations for, 1 or 2 weeks a year, and they're doing a lot of things in that time and they're spending a lot of money on food, you kind of get this idea that travel can be really expensive. But our experience has been very similar to you guys, is that it's really possible to travel the world, especially in more affordable countries, on very, very little amounts of money. And I think it's amazing to be able to educate people on that, because so many people feel like money is the reason that they can't go travel.
Yeah, and I think we came up with that paradox between time and money, because we realized that the more you guys probably realize the same as well, but usually you start is like, oh, I want more money, and then because you want all of that money, you are willing to borrow your time to get that money. So you will spend more time going to work, working on weekends, doing all of those sacrifices. But then you end up in a situation that because you spend a lot of time working for that money, you have less time. So then you have to maximize the time as much as you want. And then to maximize that time, you end up to use a lot of money as well. So you can only take a week vacation because you work is so important that you cannot leave the office. So because you have only a week of vacation, then you will spend a ton of money. For you, it makes sense to splurge on those very nice experiences and to try to see as many things as you can in that time. But if you reverse that mindset, and if you start from a place when you have a lot of money, then you basically can start using, if you starting from a mindset when you can start use your time at your advantage, then you can start to slow things down and do things without rushing. So instead of ordering your food because you are tired at the end of the day, you can spend time cooking and going to the farmer's market and doing all of those things. And then that led us to enjoy as well life with doing less things. We become pretty much minimalist into what we do. So we only buy the things we need. And so we ended up needed to spend less money. So then we needed less money as well. So it's much more, it's like moving from a scarcity mindset to more abundance mindset. And so moving from a vicious circle of having to work a lot to get all of that money from a much more, I think, virtuous. So it's moving from a vicious to a virtuous cycle, when now you have time on your hands, and then you can use that time to do more things yourself, and then you less money to do all of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. That definitely makes sense to us.
So that's kind of an interesting paradox, that we were used to be more on that vicious circle about kind of living to travel, and now we are much more like travel as a way of living, slow travel especially as a way of living. And as you guys know, slow travel give you much more opportunity to have a much richer experience while spending less money, as crazy as it might sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we're like, when we're at home, we're like, oh, we need to get out of here so we can start saving some money. But getting back to all these places that people go on vacation and spend a ton of money. But if you're like, we're in Puerto Vallarta right now, and just day-to-day life is actually like just extremely affordable compared to some spots in Western Canada.
I think all spots in Western Canada.
And you might probably get better experience as well about the things like maybe the quality of the food you could afford for the same price range, or probably less compared to what you are able to afford in Western Canada.
For someone, like, let's say someone's listening, and let's pretend there's not an ongoing pandemic, and they're thinking like, hey, switching to a more nomadic lifestyle is something I want to do. And they're in a situation where like they're working, but they're not going to be able to transition that work. So they're going to have to kind of like leave their job behind. you had mentioned that Mrs. Nomad Numbers at the start was thinking you need $100,000 to do that for a couple of years. If you were kind of talking to yourself before you started traveling, how much money do you think someone really needs to have saved if they're going to start living nomadically and start trying to, whatever it may be, to supplement that eventually, but to start traveling, what do you think someone needs?
Yeah, so I think I think your mileage will vary based on your lifestyle. For us, the sweet spot seems to be around that 30,000. But we've interviewed a bunch of people on the blog, and people could travel as little as 10,000 a year and as much as 60 and more. So it really depends on the personality and the lifestyle, but people should know that I think you can start being in places when you can spend as little as 15,000 a year as a couple and live pretty comfortably. I think this is pretty much the budget we will spend if we get stuck in Thailand, like in Chiang Mai. We will spend, our budget was around 15,000 a year. Then, of course, if you go to, and this is all about the power of geo arbitrage, which is basically going to places when you can stretch your dollars much more. So yeah, if you go to Southeast Asia, I think 15,000 it can give you already something pretty comfortable. If you go, when we spend our time in Quebec, it was more around 25,000 US dollars for a year. And we just came up with those numbers by adjusting based on, we spend at least 4 to 6 weeks there or more than a month, and we just projected that over a year. So that's how we came up with those numbers. So they should be conservative, because if you stay longer, assuming you can stay, you should get much discount on accommodation and on the top 3 expenses, which are accommodation, transportation, and food. But so it varies. I think for us, we think that with 30,000, we are pretty comfortable to do pretty much everything we want. We can just decide on which country we want based on geo arbitrage. So if you want to eat like very expensive places like Europe, let's say France or Spain, we can balance that with spending 6 months of the year in Europe and 6 months of the year in Southeast Asia, which is actually what we've done in our second year. So that's about the price point. I forgot, Ryan, was there something else in your questions, no?
No, yeah, that really answered it. Yeah, I was wondering kind of, so if someone today who's like, I'm going to have to quit my job and go traveling, and I'm going to try to start working eventually, what do I need to get started? And I think you did a really good job of answering that.
Yeah, and then it's not a all or nothing. So we've got lucky we've been savers from our respective life before we've met from the get-go. And I think we were already saving with the goal of buying a home, and California being very expensive and not being very good spenders, we just did save a lot of money. So I'm getting into that because I think it's so for us, we have all of that money we could use upfront to travel, but instead of using it just to travel, we decided to invest that money. And that will be a totally different topic. So I don't know if you want to get into that, but basically we went to a place when now we have put all of those savings that we've accumulated over the past 10 years to specific investment and strategy, that now that money is working for us. So potentially we can travel indefinitely, because now every month or every year we have enough to cover our travel spending. And that's why we have the option not to work. And that's why Mrs. Nomad Numbers felt comfortable to leave our very well-paying job to just decided to just like travel. But there was also a middle ground when you could still, like you guys are doing, being location independent, when you can still travel and or even start your business if you have a little bit of cash on the side to bootstrap something, and then enjoy that lifestyle. So it's not I think it's not all of nothing. And again, we've met people that are doing that kind of hybrid version when people can still add travel in their lifestyle while still keeping their job, if they just have the option with their employer to becoming location independent, or have more options to basically to work from anywhere. So there is a wide gamut of way of becoming nomadic as well.
Yeah, that's all super interesting to hear, and I'm curious. So, with regards to the numbers that you said, how do you guys kind of go about getting your initial budget if you haven't been to a place before? So, if you know you're going to spend like, you know, 3 months in Canada and then 3 months in Mexico and then 3 months in, let's just say, Portugal, where do you start with like the research to actually doing the budgeting for your slow travel?
Yes. So there is two things. So I'm going to answer like the specific about the research, and I think there is also the mindset. So basically, we do it the other way around because we are taking our savings and investing them, and we knew that the return on investment can give us X amount of money. We can use that as like this is how much that's the maximum we can spend, and I think that maximum was around 40,000. So that's kind of guaranteed for us. How much we can we go with this? Then we listen to podcasts and use kind of site like Nomad List and all of those sites that kind of give you rough cost of living. We actually were not really happy with those, so that's why we later on kind of build our own tools. But trying to find those systems that give you a rough idea, and then because you short travel, basically for a year we just pick 3 to 4 top locations. So like I said, year one was Canada for 3 months, Mexico for 3 months, and then we went to Aruba for a month. So we have a rough envelope for all of those like quarter. And then as we get on the ground, we just make sure that we stay within those. And the first year, we just like honestly give it a try. We say, okay, this is rough. We don't need to spend. We know the limit we have. And then we were really surprised that we are way below that max. And then each month we used to track our numbers to stay on par with that. So I think going to those sites that have rough cost of living numbers for people that are nomadic, I think that's a good start. And then you just do the sum from all of the place you want, and keeping in mind as well that you can go to very cheap place. We knew that Southeast Asia was going for by far probably the cheapest place we could stay versus more places like Europe or the US will be the much more expensive place we could stay. So playing with both. So that's how we kind of came up with the budget. But then there was also the mindset aspect, which I think it's very important. I think I've mentioned moving from a time of time scarcity to time abundance. So I'm not going to go into that again, but that's basically when for us, as we travel, we went we decided when to visit a place as well. So instead of going to a place during the high season, we're trying to find shoulder season when you can get much affordable prices, as well as even on the day-to-day things. On the day-to-day activities, we love hiking like you guys do. So we like to go hiking on weekdays instead of going hiking on weekends. Not only it's so that give us more space for ourselves because most people usually don't go during that time of the week, and it's also less busy. It's also less expensive. So there is a lot of that. I guess that shift from being having more ability to choose when we travel, give us the ability to better know the places. And then, like I said, we went from moving from a place when we were leaving to travel, so trying to save that money to go to those short vacations, to now living as long-term travelers. So we don't travel every single day. It's more like we stay in longer place, like you guys are doing as well. So we get months-long accommodation. We used to cook most of our meal at home. We used to using public transportation and get the discounts like the locals does. So that's also help us as well controlling our budget much more. And then we also have like to have techniques to reduce our spending because travel is not about like I just said, you just don't save money on travel. You also try to be smart about how you can do it. So I think the long-term Airbnbs that we've been doing has been definitely a time saver. We're able to slash the cost of the accommodation by 50% by doing that versus just going to that Airbnb for just a week. There is travel hacking, but I won't talk too much about that because if your audience is mostly from Canada, they won't be able to use that. But in a nutshell is by opening some credit card, we get to get free miles and we can use that to redeem to our travel. So our travel budget has been cut significantly because of that. And then we also like to spend on the essential. I mentioned that we're very minimalistic. And so we just buy the stuff that really wants when we need something. But mostly all of the things we do, like hiking or doesn't require much money. You just need a pair of shoes and some gears, but it's not really expensive. And then we just explore on our own pace. So we do it's like DIY. When we're in the city, we do our own kind of exploration by ourselves. We don't book tours and stuff like that. We'll do sometimes some like walking tour in the cities. Most of them are free anyway, but we just do things our own because again, back on that first principle, we have time on our side. So we have the luxury to do things the way we want and use some of that time to do that, all of that planning. Because you can be anywhere you want. You could be in Southeast Asia and just live out 15,000 USD a year. And you can go to Europe and maybe spend 25, 30, 35,000. Or even go on Aruba, which was a pretty nice island in the Caribbean. And even in Aruba, I think we didn't spend more than, it would have been less than, I think, 40,000 for a full year. If we'll have to stay 35,000 for a full year if you have to stay on that island. So yeah, you can just mix and match each of those cost of living to budget for a full year and can pretty much experience anything you want.
Yeah, I love that, and definitely love hiking on weekdays as well. And one of the other great things about kind of being so flexible time-wise is you can kind of do off-seasons places where maybe you get to go like on shoulder seasons to places that are more busy and kind of play around with that. And so for when it comes to budgeting, do you guys tend to like, once you decide, hey, we're going to be in Southeast Asia, once you're there, do you like convert your budget into a daily number and try to pay attention to that? Or how do you kind of keep track of it when you're on the ground?
So every day we will just enter our expense as we make them, because most of the times, a lot of the places we've been, it's only cash only. So we just like to keep track of those because there is not always receipt and things. We're just trying to keep in mind the top 3 budget expenses, which are accommodation, transportation, and food. So accommodation, we know that from the get-go because we book our place ahead of time. Most of the time we use Airbnb, and we use those long-term rental, and we usually even go to negotiate with the host based on the situation. And so we usually are pretty good at getting good discount on that one. And then for food and transportation, food, usually we will cook most of the time. So we just go grocery shopping and get a sense of how much produce costs and make sure it's not crazy, or go to farmers market. And then for the transportation, this one, we tend to walk pretty much everywhere. So it's going to be public transportation mostly. So yeah, we just keep an eye on them. And then I think within a couple of days, you really have a rough idea of whether or not you are going to fit within that budget. Once you have already your accommodation counted and then you have to spend on those 2, once you do your first grocery run, you have an idea. And so usually we stay within a couple of $100 of what we think things are going to be. And then through the year, we do add things up. So we were doing that through spreadsheet. Now we just created a tool for that. And then, so it's easy to really get a good check of where things are at. And then, like I said, in a world when we can travel free and there is no pandemic, when we realized that our second year was starting in Europe, we were much higher our budget. So we knew we were going to Southeast Asia, but if we would not have known that and we realized, we are way above, we just get to different countries. I think it's much easier that way to try to get in a country, and it's like, it's going to be very hard to slash your budget by 50% if you spend too much. But if you can go to different places, which we just do by the fact that we are slow travelers, then you can just adjust your budget that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I really love that tip. That's something we've really tried to do over the last couple of years, is like try to balance more expensive countries with more affordable countries. And then it kind of brings down the yearly total. And then I think something else that's really great about being able to slow travel that's different from like just the cost of going on shorter vacations is that, say if you're going to travel over to Asia, like in general, we'll travel to Asia and we'll be there for like a number of months in places where we can either bus or we can take like more affordable domestic flights or more affordable like international flights that are just quick, as opposed to like when you book a trip where you're going to, like, say from Canada, you're going to like Europe or Asia, the cost of the flight is so much that can be like such a huge cost of just, a 1 or 2 week vacation.
Yeah, definitely. We've got lucky that for us, because of that travel hacking, we don't really have to think too much about it. But actually, you're right. I think for most people, travel will also be probably in those top expenses. For us, it's really showing like in pretty low on the spectrum of our top expenses. But yeah, I think international travel is definitely a big one as well. again, Ubud, if I was looking, we spent like 17,000. It would have been 17,000 a year, and we were in a villa. It was probably the best Airbnb accommodation we could have found. We found so far, and we shared that with another couple that we met along the way. So it was like a 2-bedroom villa with facing a nice pool, away from the town of Ubud, which is pretty busy. So it was that little paradise for just like a fraction of having a vacation back in the US or even in France. So it's we love geo arbitrage for that. We get so much benefits on the ability of control how far our money can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a lot of American listeners. The travel card that's good to get is the Chase Sapphire. Is that right?
Yeah, the Chase Sapphire Preferred, I think, is the one which a lot of people tend to recommend because the annual fee is not as high. We have one which is we have the Reserve, which has a much higher fee. I think it's $450 a year, which can look steep, but it come up with so much benefits that it's worth it. I think there is a $300 credit, and then we get access to the lounge in every airport in the world, pretty much. So just that benefit alone totally pay for the 150, which is really the out-of-pocket cost for us for that card. And so those are the Chase are a good set of cards that people can try to start with, to start building their miles. I think at this point we got up to 1 million of miles since we started. We've been opening.
That's really impressive.
Because each card will give you like 60,000. I mean, usually you can get somewhere around like the 50,000 mark, and then we are 2 of us, and you can easily open 5 or 6 cards a year. Because usually you have to spend between 1,000 and 3,000 on those cards, and we try to put as much as our expense on those cards. So if you spend 30,000, a lot of that chunk is Airbnb bookings. So you end up accumulating miles pretty quickly. So now we're sitting on a lot of those, which we are trying to see what we do with them. If the pandemic is going to last, maybe we can convert that into grocery spending or other things. But so if people are in the US, definitely they should look into that. That's a good way to earn basically free travel. I think on our first year of travel, we did spend only $1,700 in international transportation, which would have been probably 10 of thousands. And that was mostly all of the flight that we could not book with miles, like the low-cost flight that you guys mentioned. Everything else was paid with those cards. So there was a good, you can easily save 10 grand if you do travel for a full year in international and all that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And is the idea of that like you find the cards with the best points and then you cancel them before the year is up, outside of like probably keeping like the Chase Sapphire?
We are keeping the Reserved because for all of the benefit that the card provides us, that's kind of the main card. But we've been rotating through a lot of cards just to get those sign-on bonuses. And then, I have a spreadsheet at the end of the year. Actually, I have one to have to close this week. I have the end of the year, make sure to call them to close them. Otherwise, you just end up with annual fees piling up, which is not worth keeping. And so that's the idea.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, maybe we'll need to figure out how we can do that more with Canadian cards. I think Canadian cards don't give the same benefits. So maybe we'll have to get an American friend to lend us their address or something like that.
Yeah, if you have a way to become somehow an address, then you get... I don't know if it's possible for non-residents, but that's something you can try to investigate on your end. Definitely, like, as you guys are traveling a lot, you will be able to like totally slash those spending to the bare minimum. And
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, our main expenses are the exact same as you mentioned, like accommodation, transportation, and food. And I mean, we do our best, like similar to what you said, booking Airbnbs for like a month or more to get that like long-term discount. If we're going to be somewhere longer than a month, trying to get off something like Airbnb and find something that doesn't have the fees and stuff like that. And then obviously budgeting food, cooking as much as we can, but it's hard, like with transportation. It's like, other than finding, the best, cheapest, most affordable flights that we can that are not, super uncomfortable and, 40 hours long when they could be 12. It's hard to cut stuff down.
Like I mentioned, we've been interviewing a bunch of folks on our blog. So the blog initially was to share the numbers, but also I think the selfish reason for me was to connect with community of like-minded people. So I say, hey, you can create the blog, we can attract those people and then we ended up connecting with you guys through that medium. I think otherwise it would have been maybe much harder. And so some of people were using techniques like house hacking, which is also a good way to reduce their accommodation, because they went from accommodation budget was like nearly zero, because they managed to do house sittings every time they were moving around, and because now they have a nice portfolio of house sits, for them it's easy to house sit. Have you guys considered trying to do that?
We have at a couple various times. We actually interviewed someone who works for House Sitting International.
Yeah. Trusted house sitters.
Trusted house sitters.
Yeah.
I think for us, it's like one of those things where dealing with the pets and like that stuff made it seem like it was maybe just better to pay for an Airbnb.
You know what? No, it wasn't even that. Honestly, it was that you have to be so flexible with your plans. And I feel like so often we're like, oh, this seems really cool, but we're in a different part of the world and we're going to stay over here for now and stuff like that. So I think once you build it up and I think you can get into routine, it sounds so awesome. And for us, it just hasn't been a priority to like make it happen.
Because I think for your audience, that will be, again, that's something that they can, because accommodation is probably our top spending categories. I think 1/3 of our budget is going for accommodation. So yeah, we can just, if you can cut that to zero, of course it comes with, you need to love animals, but that's something you like. That's also one of the strategy I mentioned, trying to find the strategy to reduce the cost. I think that's some of those strategies that I've heard as well, people doing. We've been considering doing it, but now with the pandemic, all of that is on hold, because for us, I think we'll have to build I think the challenge is, how do you get started if you don't have a resume? And since there's a lot of people out there, how do you make yourself, that kind of chicken egg problem when you want to start, but nobody know you really. So you have to, how do you promote yourself on those platforms so then they can give you a chance?
Yeah. It's like no one wants to hire someone with no experience, but you need experience to
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have to find the people who have like a pet, like, I don't know, ostrich or something no one wants to take care of.
Yeah, there is techniques like you do it, start from where you live, and you do those period of times when people don't want, like Christmas and Thanksgivings, and when people travel, and so you build your resume this way. But yeah, I think there is a few ways to do it. Again, if you're flexible, it's possible. It's when you don't have the flexibility that usually you can spending more money to those things, and so I think for us we feel lucky too, because we have that time abundance. We get much more actually benefits and flexibility than most of our friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've shared so many awesome tips, kind of all across the board so far in the interview. But do you have any other kind of like general tips for budgeting for anyone that we haven't covered?
I think people to focus on the Pareto rule, the 80-20% rules. I think I love that rule. So just focus on, you guys are familiar with the 80-20 rules, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So just focus on the top instead of tracking everything for people, because some people don't really like to budget and say, oh, if I have to track everything, just have people should just track the top expenses. So they should just look at their budget that they are having right now and just see where do they spend most of their money. Most likely is going to be accommodation, transportation, and food, and just keep an eye on those and don't focus so much into, oh, I'm going to a coffee shop and all of those other expenses that we can maybe do as more often, but it's not going to matter too much about that. And again, for people that have the ability to be flexible about the location, the geo arbitrage for sure will help them keeping a track of their budget. So that way, if the budget doesn't go the way they want on longer period of time, they can always relocate where they live, and that will help much more than trying to deprive themselves in that location just to eat their budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great tip. And if people want to find out more about you and Mrs. Nomad Numbers, read through some of your resources, follow along with what you guys are up to, where can they go to find that?
Yeah, I think the best way will be to go to our blog. So it's nomadnumbers.com. And then we have a newsletter there. So if you get on the newsletter, you will just get our updates as we publish new content. So that's the easiest way to follow along with us. And of course, you can reply to it so you can get in touch with us directly as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a great conversation. I think you've re-inspired us to revisit our numbers a little bit and get a little bit more tight with our budget. So we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda and Ryan, for having me today.